Deadlifting big weight is one of the best things that you can do to improve your overall health, boast about your strength, to post a great Instagram video, or really just to make physical progress in the gym. It's a full body movement that really, if you can deadlift big weight, you're going to be a strong person. Now, in order to get a big deadlift, you can't just deadlift more and more and more. You have to do accessories. But these accessories come in a variety of usefulness. So today, I'm going to tell you the worst deadlift accessories and what you should do instead to be able to blow your number out of the water. Now, when we get into accessories, we have to say, what is the overarching objective? Well, the objective has to be that it actually increases your deadlifts. One common pitfall that people fall into is they take all of the musculature that's used for a lift, say posterior chain, and then they say anything that strengthens the posterior chain is going to be useful. This is sort of true, but not as much as people would hope. It's true because yes, that could build some muscle, and muscle cross-sectional area of the muscle is what's going to determine how much you can lift long-term. But strength is a skill. And so the skill has to be built to be able to use that muscle in a fashion to deadlift. Also, is this addressing the weakest link in the chain? If not, you're just making something stronger for the sake of making something stronger. When I give you the accessories that you should do instead, you'll learn that you don't actually need to identify the particular muscle group that is weakest. You can expose this through movement alone. Let's get into it. Coming up first is a very popular one, and this is deficit deadlifts. That is not going to make some people happy, but let me explain. If you think of the strength that someone has for an 18-inch deadlift, let's say, theoretically, the higher up the bar is, the easier it should be. But there's a group of people who benefit a lot from exploding the bar off the floor, trying to gain a lot of momentum and blasting through any sticking point at the knee. The difficulty with deficit deadlifts is that you put that bar down in a lower position, meaning your body is in a lower position, meaning that when you get into your proper wedged starting spot, you actually can create more power off the floor. You can create more tension and therefore more momentum, and therefore more strength from the floor. And so whether this helps or not can be a bit of a 50-50. There's a group where that extra room to explode off the floor and the extra spring actually makes them just better at deficit deadlifts and not necessarily better at traditional deadlifts. If you think of a deficit deadlift in the position you're going to end up in, your hips will be a little bit higher, your shoulders will be over the bar as per usual. And with higher hips and shoulders in a very similar position, well, how much is this specifically improving our deadlift technique and our deadlift strength? I'm a very firm opinion that if you lose your integrity in the top half of the lift, it's because something went wrong in the first half. So if we're not curing and improving the position in the first half, maybe that accessory should be replaced with something else. And I'll get into that in my replacement exercise. But deficit deadlifts, that is my first exercise in terms of an assistance for a deadlift that I think could be improved on. We're going to cut away from the video for a minute to talk to you about today's video sponsor, which is me. MooseCoaching.com is linked down below. These are programs that I've personally written. They're on sale for about $2 a week with education and the programming itself. I'm telling you how to deadlift with these accessories, but all I'm giving is exercises. I can't go into the nuance of an entire program for a YouTube video. In terms of sets, reps, rest times, progressions, all of that can be taken care of for you very, very cheap. So if you want to become the strongest version of yourself, don't just take these couple of exercises and swap them out. Go ahead and check out MooseCoaching.com. Super affordable for all of you guys. I want this to be accessible, and I want you to take something away, not just for 12 weeks, but for your whole training life. Number 2, pen lay rows, specifically strict pen lay rows. I love pen lay rows and accessory exercise, but I love them when the intention is to lift the bar from the floor to your knee like a deadlift, and then carry momentum through with your arms. You're cheating this a little bit in this case is let you use so much more weight. And ultimately, if you are at 10% or 20% of your deadlift 1 rep max when you're doing an exercise, it's not going to strengthen your position off the floor enough to matter for an actual deadlift. And so if you're hinged, you have the bar resting on the ground, and you're very strictly rowing that, I don't see any manner by which that's going to help you lift big weight. I would rather, if your goal is to have stronger pulling movements and stronger position and posture off the floor, well, let's address the pulling movements with something like a seated V row and strengthen up your back. And if we want to strengthen your spinal erectors, well, we're going to get to that in my replacement exercises. Next up is hamstring curls. This falls firm into the category of exercise that strengthens a muscle that also is used in deadlifts, but not near in the same way. The skill in the recruitment to bend the knee is not the same skill in recruitment as it is to extend the hip. So if we're practicing and building muscle relating to bending the knee, is this really useful? When we lock out a deadlift, we're extending the knee. The only credence I will give, and the only thing I will say is I'm talking purely about performance for strength in the movement itself, not in injury prevention, not in building a base, but in actually this will translate to a bigger deadlift. I see hamstring curls as an accessory exercise that you could do without. Next up, another very popular one, hip thrusts. If we think of the position of the glutes when they need to be used most in the deadlift, it is off of the floor. It is not at lockout. When we think of the lockout position, how much are our hips pushing forward actually lifting the bar up? Well, not much. In fact, what's the weakest link in the chain when you push your hips forward? It's your upper back. So you'll see all the time people get their hips through, but their thoracic vertebrae is all bent over. And you're not gonna get the down call, Coco. But when you're in that position and your hips are back, it's because your torso is hung over. You'll never see someone with a stiff upper back and hips back behind them. It just doesn't really happen. You're never actually directly opposing the force of the barbell and of gravity on the barbell when you push hips forward. I cannot be clear enough on that. This exercise itself doesn't make sense. When do we use the glutes the most? Well, it's just like in the bottom of a squat. We use that off of the floor to be able to drive the bar up. We also use that to offload some effort from our back. Of course, the more you use your glutes, the less you're gonna use your back. And so yes, is this a good exercise to build a base and to prevent injuries to your back? Sure, don't mind it for that. But in terms of technically improving your deadlift, doing hip thrusts doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Instead, strengthening your upper back will make you feel like you are twice as strong and twice as powerful at that lockout. Lastly, worst deadlift accessory is a plank. I'm not saying you shouldn't do core work, you shouldn't strengthen your core. Deadlifts are a great way to strengthen your core alone, but I appreciate that the strength of your core is the ability, you'll gain the ability to be able to use power from your legs, translate that to your upper body and ultimately into the bar. Holding that nice stiff position is integral. But if we do a plank, we are so far away from the actual load that we're gonna try to be resisting. If we look at the internal, external forces, it's not even remotely comparable. You can do planks to maximum exertion, and that can be good, as in you just get in that plank position and squeeze as hard as you can. But there's something about actually resisting load in strengthening your core that's gonna be way more useful. And let's get straight on to that. This is not one of my 4 exercises that you should do to improve your deadlift, but this is an honorable mention, and this is ab wheel. Ab wheel is like plank, but amplified and useful for strength. If you do an ab wheel and you can do 10 reps relatively easy, chuck on a weight vest and do a couple with that and build up strength that way. Do it from your toes if you can. But the better you get at the ab wheel, the more that will translate over to your compound lifts, especially if you practice the same breathing and bracing mechanics as you do in your lifting. When you train your core for strength and for translating to compound lifts, your breathing pattern should not be the same as traditional core work, where we're letting our air stay nice and loose. You want to brace your diaphragm and your pelvic floor and your core, because ultimately the weakest link in the chain of those 3 is going to be the one that gives out. And if you go to do your ab wheel and you can't hold your breath because your diaphragm just isn't strong enough to oppose the force that your core is creating, well, you're gonna have to build the strength of your diaphragm using this movement. Same thing with your pelvic floor. If you feel like your pelvic floor has let go when you're in your ab wheel, well, you're gonna have to build the strength anyway in that particular way. So it's a really good catch-all, really safe, and great way to improve your core to very high intensity without doing huge amounts of volume that don't translate over into 1 rep max, and that will actually make your deadlift better. That's the honorable mention. Let's start. Exercise number 1, snatch grip deadlifts. This is going to expose a couple of things. First, the wider your hands are, the lower you have to get down to the bar. So this is like a deficit deadlift, but one that's actually gonna be useful. And that's because we're now shifting a lot of effort onto your upper back. The wider you go, the more upper back and thoracic area we're focusing on. If you can get strong in your snatch grip deadlift, by the time you come in and you go to a traditional deadlift, you're not gonna fold your upper back like you used to. And if you can hold that strong upper back position, you couple that with a really strong core, well, your positioning off the ground will be fantastic. And if your positioning off the ground to the knee is fantastic, this cures a lot of issues from the knees up. So this would be, in my opinion, a great replacement for a deficit deadlift. It would also be a great replacement for a hip thrust, because we're addressing the bit that's actually gonna get you a bigger deadlift. Exercise number 2 that you should do is paused deadlifts. Paused deadlifts have the same sort of stimulus as deficit deadlifts, but we're reinforcing the actual position in a traditional deadlift. Pausing the deadlift 1 or 2 inches off the ground or just below your knee, depending on where your sticking points and weaknesses, is a really good way to reinforce the most vulnerable position where you're going to tend to lose the lift. It's also a good way to practice your deadlifts in a way that you can drop the weight substantially but still keep the intensity relatively high, meaning this is going to translate over to your total deadlift result as well. Exercise number 3. Safety squat bar good mornings. I prefer the safety squat squat bar over a barbell, although you still can use a barbell, because I find if I get into the bottom position with a barbell, it tends to want to roll onto my neck, where of course a safety squat bar isn't going to do that. While this is a great exercise for your spinal erectors and your upper back, it also has you resisting the exact same force that the deadlift is going to try and do to your upper body. It's going to try to do the exact same folding of your chest, the exact same rounding of your back. And the stronger you get to resist those forces, the stronger you're going to be able to push through the floor and get big weight off the ground and to lockout. And finally, what you should do is cheat rows. There's no point in your actual ability to be able to strictly pull a barbell towards you, because in the deadlift, we're actually not contracting our biceps at all. In fact, we should be contracting our triceps to keep our arms nice and long. If you're able to do that, and you can do that with bigger weight through cheat rows than strict rows or strict pen lay rows, you're gonna build your spinal erector strength. You're gonna build that position at a really awkward spot around 18 inches off the ground. And you're gonna be able to get very, very strong with weight that shouldn't cause you any sort of substantial injury risk, at least nothing that I find over the top or inappropriate. So to summarize, in my opinion, the deadlift accessories you should do away with are deficit deadlifts, strict pen lay rows, hamstring curls, hip thrusts, and plank. Instead, I think you're getting a lot more return from ab wheels, snatch grip deadlifts, pause deadlifts, safety squat bar good mornings, and cheat rows. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What is your favorite deadlift accessory, and what's your deadlift goal? Thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, lift heavy, be kind, and we'll see you tomorrow.